Something terrible happened at my school, but no one else seems to care. Mr. Vermeil? Katie called, raising her hand. I think I saw a man with a gun outside. There is no combination of words more perfectly calibrated to turn a teacher's blood to ice. The horror only settled deeper in my chest when I watched my kids go crowding around the windows, chattering excitedly amongst themselves like a shooting star was going by. I don't see him. Where is he? Oh, he's right there, behind the tree. What's he look like? What's he doing? I couldn't see a thing out there, myself. The thick, oppressive blanket of mountain fog that always settled on this school made visibility low in the best of times. All I could see was that endless ocean of trees disappearing into that vast backdrop of white. But I trusted my students and took their reports dead seriously. Get down! I finally shouted once I'd worked out the knot in my throat. Get down under the windows. Don't let him see you. It was the first time I'd raised my voice at these kids, and that scared them more than the man outside. The room was a cacophony of squeaking chairs and shoved desks as they rushed to huddle under the windows. All the while, my heart was pounding in my ears as I scrambled to pull the Velcro straps over every window that would release the safety shutters. Every instant, I felt certain some homicidal maniac was about to take my head off with a .308 Winchester. I wasn't even just scared to die. I was scared of my students being forced to witness something like that. But I got lucky, or maybe he had mercy. The only way to reach the headmistress' personal phone was an old-school red telephone sat on my desk, with a bit of tape reading FOREMERGNCIESONLY. She'd always been very particular that she be called, instead of the police in times like these. All I had to do was punch in 66, and she picked up in an instant. I'm embarrassed to imagine what I must sounded like. The incomprehensible verbal diarrhea of a man who'd never dealt with a situation more deadly than a bicycle crash or a high fever. But luckily, she seemed to parse together exactly what I was getting at, and her stoic, commanding tone silenced my babbling in an instant. It will be dealt with. Sirens. Sirens started blaring all over school like it was about to be leveled by a tornado, or maybe nuclear Armageddon. Under the din, my students all frantically whispered to each other, trying to guess at what was going on. He's a hunter, was the consensus. That almost calmed me down. If he was just some hunter after the elk and mule deer up here in the Rockies, then no biggie, right? But for some reason, the word hunter seemed to strike the kids with terror. Outside, I heard the screech of tires and 2 rear doors being slammed open. My curiosity piqued. I'd seen that black van labeled ECURITY parked in the lot, but never gotten a glimpse inside. Despite all my better judgment, I couldn't resist the tiniest peek under the corner of a shutter. Out of the van poured 2 individuals dressed less like school security guards and more like the sort of shadowy government agents you'd see in movies, black suits, shades, and earpieces fitting their perfect combovers. I think what I saw them do next was the moment that forever changed me, forever shattered my delusion that the universe is ultimately a rational and orderly place. The 2 guards checked off their equipment, dropped to all fours, and broke into a sprint. Under other circumstances, it would have been laughable. As it was, it stole my breath away. They ran not even like primates would, but with the exact speed and style of wolves. They must have been going 15 miles per hour minimum. Human bodies just don't work that way. We can't twist our bodies in such a way to allow ourselves to full-bore gallop at that kind of speed. Our joints weren't meant to bend in those directions. They disappeared into the forest like hunting dogs let loose upon the scent of prey. I jumped, and a gasp spread across the room as a gunshot erupted in those woods. And then another. 2 shots total, echoing down the foggy valleys of the mountain, scaring away the crows. Then came the long silence as I held my breath, waiting to see if the nightmare was all over or just beginning. And then the screaming began. It started as a rumbling murmur, one I couldn't place. Then it acquired peaks and troughs, reaching pitches that managed to strain my ears. At its height, it almost seemed louder than the gunshots had been. It was a man's voice, at least at first, but then it devolved into something that didn't sound human at all. Like his vocal cords had been ripped into, and the only sounds he could still produce was to bay like a dying animal. Yet somehow, even that didn't horrify me as much as my students' reactions. They seemed relieved, even laughing amongst themselves, as if this proved we were out of danger. The screams dulled, the sirens disappeared, and my students returned to their seats, staring at me as if expecting me to continue the lesson. It was all so surreal, like something out of a dream. Never before in my life have I been surrounded by people, yet felt so utterly alone. I tried not to break down in front of my own students, but unlike my class, I couldn't just move past what had happened, like it all been no big deal. So, like a sleepwalking man acting on instinct, I did the first thing I could think of. I called the headmistress again. Her tone was flat, as if nothing was out of the ordinary. Vermeil. I wanted to scream at her, but words failed me. I was panting like a dog. I need. I took a drink of water with a shaky hand. I need to know what that was. Mr. Vermeil, this phone is only to be used in the case of emergencies. Emergency. This isn't an emergency. There was a shootout outside my classroom. Where's the police? The press? They're not coming, she said sternly. It was all a false alarm. Nobody was hurt. Nobody was hurt. Are you hearing yourself? I heard a man wail like he was being fed feet first into a meat. I caught myself, glancing at my class. If you had heard the things I've heard, you wouldn't be so. When I employed you under the auspices of the Integration Initiative, it was because I was assured of your dedication to teaching. Surely you recognize the importance of not allowing your class to fall even a day behind the schedule outlined in the syllabus? We cannot allow every minor incident to interfere with their minor incident. Am I the only one here who hasn't lost their mind? If this is what you consider routine, then I don't want to know. Mr. Vermeil. She spoke in that tone that always silenced me, as if she commanded my very mind. In the silence, she let out a long sigh. When her voice returned, I couldn't tell if she was leveling with me or humoring me. Tell you what? I can tell you've had a stressful day. Why don't you take the rest of it off? I can have a substitute fill in while you get some rest, okay? I wanted to argue, to scream and shout, but I realized how my students were looking at me and noticed the tears on my cheeks. Needless to say, I did end up taking the day off. All the while, I agonized over whether to quit. I mean, this was supposed to be my big break. My first real teaching job since the incident a few years back. No more tutoring, no more subbing. Getting to head my very own class and create my own lesson plans. I spent the night on the couch watching the news like a hawk. It was all still small-town nonsense. A cat stuck in a tree, a charming local bake sale. Not a word about whatever had happened in that school on the mountainside. The headmistress gaslighting was starting to work on me. If nobody saw anything wrong with what had happened, then the problem must be me, right? I must have misinterpreted everything. There had to have been some reasonable explanation for what I'd seen and heard. So the next morning, it was right back to work. The thing is, I've never gotten a good explanation for what the integration initiative was. I'd assumed it was some sort of remedial education program. After all, the bulk of my class was severely behind by 5th grade standards. Many needed to learn basic social behaviors, properly expressing their emotions, how to read or write, or even how to speak at all. The Hastings twins, for instance. They were brother and sister, or so I've been told, but near impossible to tell apart. They were both so androgynous, with flawless, pale skin, totally free of even a single strand of hair, even eyebrows. And they never emoted, never reacted, never even blinked. If you didn't know any better, you'd assume they were mannequins set up at their desks, positioned to stare at me in perfect stillness as I taught. But they were just one of the more extreme examples. A few were more like normal kids, just a little behind. Katie, for instance. When I had a quiet moment in class that day, I noticed her completing a maze in her coloring book with a crayon and beckoned her over. She sat politely across from me as I composed myself. Katie, I just wanted to say you were very brave to speak up yesterday. I know that must have been scary. School is supposed to be a safe place. If you ever need to talk to me about anything, you can just let me know, okay? She stared at me for a moment, and then said, as casually as you'd discuss the weather, I hope he suffered. There was a long silence. I blinked, trying to register what I'd heard. What? I hope he died real slow, she continued. Her face was blank, her tone flat. I hope they took their time with him. I hope that he felt every moment of it. I wiped the sweat from my brow. That's not. He was a hunter, Mr. Vermeil. He deserved it, she insisted. I hope they hurt him really, really badly. I hope they took him somewhere so they can keep him alive. I hope they're taking away his fingernails and his teeth and his eyes, and he's crying and screaming and... Katie, I suddenly cut in. Do you remember how we talked about no subjects? She nodded. After all, we'd spent a lot of time in class discussing what was appropriate to say. I continued, trying to hide the quiver in my voice. Well, it's not appropriate to talk about, death and suffering. It was like a switch flipped. In an instant, Katie went right back to being just an ordinary little girl. Oh, sorry, Mr. Vermeil. I'll remember that for next time. And just like that, she went right back to her desk, leaving me dazed and stunned like I'd just been punched in the teeth. Even now, I can't help but wonder what she meant by next time. I've learned my lesson. Never talk about what happened to anyone. Never even mention it. And the same goes for any other strange oddities I'm beginning to notice around the school, like the ditch full of the shed skins of something much larger than any reptile we have up here in Colorado, or the sound of loud TV static e-meat from a bathroom I'm 100% certain had no television. All of it's completely normal to everyone around me. But I can't get it out of my mind. I still check the news and Google obsessively, but can't find the slightest mention of anything off about this place. I did, however, notice something on Facebook. Someone local was asking whether anybody had seen her brother, William, a heavyset man with a big bushy beard who'd gone missing without even his PLB being able to report any location. The post had been made the day after the incident I'd witnessed. Apparently, the last time they'd spoken, William said that he was going out on a hunting trip. To be continued.